if you thought about crypto whales, who would be the first one that would pop up in your head? Who is the biggest Bitcoin holder? Well, I'd say if you thought, Satoshi Nakamoto, because he has 1 million Bitcoin, you'd have a pretty good guess. But if you had to think a little bit outside of the box, who that you wouldn't really expect is another massive holder of Bitcoin? Take a look at this. US government among the largest holders of Bitcoin with over $5 billion in Bitcoin. The $5 billion estimation is based on 3 major seizures linked to the Bitfinex hack and Silk Road, meaning the actual holdings could be even much larger. But isn't it interesting to note that regardless of how they got these Bitcoin, and even though they're planning to sell them, that the government is one of the largest holders of Bitcoin in the world? Isn't that interesting? Not saying it's concerning, but it is kind of concerning. But rather, they're not doing this in the background. They're doing it right in front of your face, holding tons of Bitcoin. And the funniest part is, you might say, well, but they're planning to sell it, so it shows they're bearish on it. It shows they don't want to have anything to do with it. Well, if you really don't want something to exist, I think you'd burn it. That's one thing. Or just give it back to the people it was stolen from. But obviously it's money, so you're not going to do that. But it does show the legitimacy of Bitcoin. I mean, you can't outright ban something you've, been selling yourself for money. No, other people cannot sell and buy this crypto, but we can. Now again, there are rules in place with exactly how they can sell all this stuff and when exactly it belongs to them. But to me, it's interesting that the US government just uses crypto exchanges to sell seized Bitcoin. It's just funny how this system actually works. But it makes me think of this. New. The SEC has added crypto to its list of 2024 exam priorities. Again, take into consideration the fact that the US government is one of the world's biggest holders of cryptocurrency, but that if you ask the government, hey, what's the status of all this? They're always pretty vague, but in the background, or rather in the forefront, but not really, note that the most crypto companies are not registered with the SEC, thus do not pay registration fees. Does this indicate that Gary Gensler is using agency resources and funds paid for by registered companies to make a priority of cracking down on crypto, an industry he has not been authorized to regulate yet? Or does the SEC expect that more crypto companies will be registered with the agency in 2024? I mean, there's not really any way to register, and 𝗫𝗫𝗀𝗃 said, strategy is simple. Crack down, obtain leverage on them, let them run, but with the SEC's blessings, and then control them. Or rather, I see it this way. Do one thing on one end, do another thing on the other end, make everything as vague as possible. In the back end though, hold a frick ton of Bitcoin, make a frick ton of money off these seizures, make a frick ton of money of lawsuits, and try to get everything in your pocket. Not necessarily only in terms of funds, but also in terms of control. I mean, the moment that the SEC said, hey, let's regulate crypto, they could have a little bit more control over some parts, but most likely a pretty big part of crypto would be allocated to different agencies. Perhaps a new task force would exist. But most importantly, that second part of funds and control in terms of regulatory wise, this funds wise, right? This seizures and these prestige point of all these lawsuits would now most likely go away. So even though they'd have a lot of registrants and perhaps more power under their belt, a lot of that power will most likely be allocated to other agencies, and no more war chests, no more victories under the belt. Less power in terms of power points. Talking about power, I still believe that this whole case with regards to Sam Bankman-Fried is the SEC going a little bit stronger than they need to showcase that they don't have a friend policy. What I mean with that is, we all know Sam Bankman-Fried, Gary Gensler, proper connections. We all know the whole William Hinman debacle with Ethereum and the strange things that happened there. Everybody in the news a couple months ago was saying, Sam will probably not go to jail. He's donated too much to politicians. He's in too good of an eye. But remember, guys, people with big money will sell out their best friends for another buck. Or to say it differently, people do crazy things for money. People do crazy things for power. And so to sell out Sam Bankman-Fried, to basically give your agency a break, and to showcase you're not corrupt, it's throwing It's throwing somebody under the bus for your own benefit. Worse things have happened in the past. What I mean with that is, Sam Bankman-Fried is trying all these defenses, and people are saying, oh, it's ridiculous. Oh, you shouldn't be allowed to do that. This man is trying to get some type of help for himself. Man, this guy's been thrown under the bus by all his employees, his ex-girlfriend, all these guys. And I think he was going to rely on a lot of political help for him to get out, but it's not coming. And so him trying to say, hey, I might not be able to testify without Adderall. He's trying to get some sort of steadfast, to hold on to something, because it's pretty sad if you look at the situation. Is this guy a piece of garbage? Should he rot in jail for a long time? Hey, personal opinions may change on that, or might be different on that. I personally think this guy, for what he's done, could definitely spend 100,000 years in jail. Oh, I had the wrong advice. Wrong, don't matter. Jail. Straight to jail. But on an opposite side, I don't think he expected that. I think he expected to be able to walk off, say, hey, had some wrong advisors. Just a kid. Made a mistake. You're playing with the SEC here, baby. They'll sell you out in a second. Take a look at this policy statement, who nobody knows what to do with. Take a look at the idea that the government owns a freak ton of Bitcoin. I mean, they've said they're going to sell all the Bitcoin with regards to Silk Road quickly. Here, on March 14th, the government sold 10,000 Bitcoin for $200 million. If they've got $5 billion worth of a war chest, it's not really making pace, is it? All right? Perhaps they're also waiting for the bull run. Perhaps they're waiting to turn this $5 billion into $30 billion in the next 2 years, which is why they're making it so slow. I don't know exactly, but... And if we got to be honest with you guys, the governments in general are doing a lot of crazy stuff right now. I mean, to be honest, US and their debt is going so hard that it wouldn't be that surprising to me if they want some Bitcoin on the side to either still have when the system takes over. You got to understand, they could have sold this really quickly had they really wanted to. Oh, but they don't want to dump the market. Why wouldn't they want to dump the market? No, think about it, right? If Bitcoin is something you really strongly dislike, and you've got an option to liquidate your holdings, regardless of what it's going to do to the markets, why not do it? Think about it clearly. You might say, well, because they want to make more money. So they want to make money off of Bitcoin as they expect is going to rise. Or what can the philosophy there be? They don't want to screw retail investors. They don't? But take a look at the lawsuits that the SEC threw up. Those hurt investors. Those lost people a lot of money. And think about it carefully. If the government thought it was going to zero, why not sell now? If the government didn't think it would go to zero, no, let's rephrase that completely. Dusty, what are you doing? If the government thought that Bitcoin would go to zero, why wouldn't they sell everything straight away? If the government didn't think it would go to zero, why not try crashing it? Why not try let it go to zero by selling everything at once? On the opposite side, if the government didn't think it would go to zero, wouldn't it make a lot of sense for them to just hold on as long as possible to get as much money as possible? On an opposite side, if they don't think it's going to zero, wouldn't seizing it and holding on to it be the best way so it doesn't have to say anywhere that the government bought Bitcoin, but just hold on to it and say you're going to sell it a bit at a time. Every year you're going to sell a bit, but then in the meantime just be able to hold it for the next decade or so, because through this scheme there's still very big Bitcoin holders, and it's just interesting to think about. As I said though, a Bank of Japan, for example, conducting an unscheduled bond buying operation. You want to know that there's a lot of shady stuff going on in the background that we're not seeing. And here, with this situation of them holding so much Bitcoin, I think this is another one of those parts where you can't see the full picture just quite. It will only show itself over the next couple of months or years. But this stuff is a whole lot shadier than meets the eye.